amount of time. They need it for their other associates. They need it for partners. You end up going up on a dead end. So you're not always billing. You don't always get to bill the client for the amount of time you actually spend on something in a firm environment. So some of it will be outsourced or outsourced to someone else, hopefully as a form of accommodation. And the other part is that it has to be knocked down, I think, because you just can't. I mean, no client's going to be like, we really like him, but we're going to pay twice as much.
And if you, I mean, a former coworker has dyslexia and was a time and a halfer, and she and I had several conversations about billable hours, and I'm happy to put you in touch if you, I mean, and there's plenty of people here. So, yeah. I mean, and I mean, it's an issue that our profession needs to address because we have to have, I mean, the profession has to figure this out, and I don't think they have yet.
I mean, there are so many problems. We could have a whole 2-day conference about the problems with the billable hour. Yeah. So to the extent if you are a person with specific issues around the billable hour, I mean, you might want to seek out a job that doesn't the big firm billable hour model.
There are more firms moving to a flat rate structure for billing. It's not to say you can't work at a firm. Like you now suddenly, if you have to become a public interest lawyer. Congratulations, you're giving you a new career track. It looks like you wanted to work at a firm, you came to this conference, you're like, why did you go to that? It sucked. Now I have to become a public interest lawyer and practice disability law. So much for the first part of our panel. Now we got a job for you. Come work at our commune. There are firms that will do flat rate. They're harder to find. That's something, and we're talking about match, it's something you should be looking for and find out how much time they're eating. Because I know at my firm, which was a smaller firm, they ate a lot of time for associates with or without disabilities. Plus, a lot of us without learning disabilities are slow because we go off in some direction. We find out that that's not really the direction, no matter how much experience we have. We can't bill all that time for our client. So firms are constantly eating time, but then you have pressure to bill a certain number of hours every year. You're a human. I mean, you have to live in this process too, so you have to find the right match. So find some firms that are having a better approach, a more humane approach to billing for both their clients and for you.
Right, there are firms that, for example, specialize in catering to certain mid-sized clients, maybe school districts or, municipalities, and they have, special arrangements, and, there's different models.
I think there were some questions over here.
Yeah, there's one back here.
Okay. You mentioned that you're not legally required to disclose your disability during the interview process, but what if you need accommodations during the interview? How do you handle that?
Well, the short answer is then you would disclose. So I would say, I mean, depending on the accommodation, and this is true after you're hired also, but you can sometimes get informal accommodations without disclosure, depending on what accommodation you need. But if the accommodation is, there's no way to go about it without disclosing, you do, in that process, have to disclose. And the employer does have to engage with you and work to accommodate you the same way she would have to after you were hired on. So the accommodation rules that apply on the job also apply in the interview process, but yeah, you would have to disclose in that situation.
Or you think you have any particular accommodation, or?
Well, I mean, it depends. I know in my own experience, using that experience, you go into for an interview and you have to do, turns out, whoops, now you have to give all this material, can I write a memo? Or do something even where it's expected. And, just that experience, I know a lot of you are still in law school, but particularly in the public sector, that's actually a fairly common practice. You'll have to go in and do some sort of performance-based activity before you actually went to interview. So that's, really my question, really to let students know exactly how to go about requesting those accommodations and pretty much disclosing disability even though you shouldn't have to.
Yeah, I mean, I would say just in that situation, if you do need, a time and a half or whatever it would be for an exam or, performance type of test, I think you would have to disclose. And, that does make, like I said, the tricky thing about that is if you're not hired and you think it may have been based accommodation, it's a little bit harder to prove because there are so many factors. Unless, you disclose and ask for an accommodation and they say, well, no, I'm not gonna accommodate you, never mind, then it's a little easier to prove. So, it's a difficult situation, but, you would have to disclose in order to get an accommodation like that, I would think.
And I think just in general, thinking through it, how you're going to answer screwball questions or tasks that you hadn't expected during an interview or interactions. Obviously you can't think through every possible scenario, but we used to tell, people just be prepared for the illegal question, and you don't want, if you still are interested in potential employment with this person after the question comes out of their mouth, just be prepared for how you're going to respond. And I think that's, I think interviews are, as much about sort of the substance of who you are as like the gamesmanship and, how do you interact, or do you pass the decent human, can you deal with people test?
It shouldn't be your job on it, and I'll be quick, it shouldn't be your job on an interview to put people at ease about your disability, if part of it is apparent to them or all of it is apparent to them, but unfortunately that is part of it. And I find that even with interviewing with other law professors for teaching jobs, and it's absolutely ridiculous, they should know better, but they don't know better. And so you don't want your whole interview to revolve around that, but you realize you have to be a little bit in control of this process, so don't feel acted upon. So shift it back. If somebody is asking you if that chair is comfortable for 20 minutes, that's taking up your time. And so you have to shift it back at some point. But let's say if you need an interpreter, you need to know about the location, you have a lot of anxiety. What about the location? If it's going to be noisy or if it's going to be inaccessible, contact the hiring partner, the hiring chair, whatever the structure is. And I've asked, I do talk about my disability a little bit on interviews, sometimes just kind of put people at ease about, but the positive of it, like how it connects to other people, how it connects to diverse students, something like that, and then just move
Sort
on.
of cheery, short, and reassuring, or
Like a Hallmark moment. Dun, dun, dun. Well, I don't know, it sort of comes up, it just manifests a lot, even if I don't want to talk about it. There's like somebody who wants to tell me about their brother or something, and that has nothing to do with why we're here, but you can't say that, right? They're hiring you based on your personality too. And so you kind of have to go with it. So sometimes we'll talk about just connecting to other diverse students, or I'll ask them if they have a NALSWD chapter, or also if they have other disabled law professors. They freak out about that one. That's kind of too confrontational, I think, because they're like, shit, no. Were we supposed to? Sorry, question.
We're talking about matching and what makes a good fit. What are some indicators of a good match? In an interview setting, you really, I found that you really don't get all that much useful information. And also, trusting your instincts. I had a pretty severe traumatic brain injury a while back. And, I've been in interviews where, I felt like I would be really happy at a job at a particular place. And then, working there, it's been an entirely different story. But I just wanted to hear about indicators of a good match.
I think it's tough, in interviews. I try to talk to as many people as I can that have worked at a place before me, particularly people with any disability at all, if I can find them, and if they have a disability similar to mine, great.
Yeah, I would say too, think about what it is that would make a good match for you, because it is very, specific to every person, and then think about questions that might really get at, that you could ask the interviewer, that would really get at some of those really important things. And again, that's hard because everybody, interviewers or recruiters want to show their best side, but I think if there are specific things that are really important to you, just be sure that you think about those beforehand and try to get at those issues when you have an opportunity to ask questions, but it's still not perfect.
During the interview, there's a fine line between wanting to sell yourself and